to welcome these guests, the family of Lowell Robinson, Elaine and Luke Grant, Janice and Leila France, and Craig, Jen, Zach, and Sarah Robinson. We also welcome representatives of the Garden Club Federation of Massachusetts, Jill Malcolm, the current president, and Ann Cairns, the president of the Shrewsbury Garden Club and native plant ambassador of the South Central region of the Garden Club Federation of Massachusetts. And although this is the Garden Club of Norfolk's largest civic garden, our 39 members also tend to 14 other gardens and planters that beautify this town. So speaking next on the history of the Veterans Memorial Plaza Lower Gardens is Emily Nicodemus, the project chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. In July 1988, landscape architect Lowell Robinson drew up plans for the Norfolk Veterans Memorial, which is this whole area here. The memorial and the upper gardens, which are the ones back there, were completed in 1995. A video of the Veterans Day ceremony in 1995 show a view of the Veterans Plaza with plantings on either side of behind us. But the lower garden on either side of the granite steps, which we're going to dedicate today, was not yet planted. These gardens were planted somewhere between 1996 and 2001. They were planted with 168 juniper and yews. And by 2005, all the plants had died or were in very poor condition. Lowell Robinson drew up restoration recommendations, and his notes indicated to add animal control, mainly rodent control from his notes. Unfortunately, his plans were never enacted. The Norfolk DPW then covered up the area, which is 900 square feet, with 6 to 8 inches of mulch. In 2019, the Garden Club was asked by a Norfolk Historical Commission member, Barbara Bartholomew, if the club would consider restoring these gardens. The club decided to accept the project, and a detailed plan was formulated that included the recommendations of 2 consultants, Amanda Sloan and Betty Sanders, both of whom specialize in native plant landscapes. We formed a committee and considered the site location, soil requirements, light, how to plant on a slope of 22 degrees, and water needs. We decided to design a low-maintenance garden that included 257 native shrubs, plants, and grasses. In July 2020, the Norfolk Select Board approved our plan, and the Norfolk DPW agreed to provide and place boulders as specified in our plan. They also pledged to annually provide us with mulch. We applied for the Civic and Historic Landscape Grant from the Garden Club Federation of Massachusetts, which we received last September. This grant enabled us to move forward with our plan. However, the cost of the project was well over $4,000, so we then sought and received generous donations from local organizations and citizens in memory of or in honor of our loved ones who served our country. With your help, we were able to complete the project and can provide maintenance and plant replacements next spring if necessary. Thank you all who donated to help make this project possible. Tidaldi will now talk about the process it took for us to create this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. On behalf of the Garden Club, I want to thank everyone who has come today to the dedication of this garden and to honor Lowell Robinson. On a personal note, Lowell was a dear friend of mine for 30-plus years, and I am proud to have played a small role in this celebration. I would like to take a few minutes to describe the process by which this garden came to be. In June of 2020, Leslie Lincoln and I were tasked to design the layout for the native plants and flowers in this Plaza garden. From a suggestion by a consultant, Amanda Sloan, the Garden Club decided to make use of boulders strung out in the garden to resemble a string of pearls. This would not only separate the plants and flowers, but enhance the layout without being a distraction. Our thought was to place the largest boulders closest to the steps at the center of the plaza, and gradually reduce the size diameter-wise as we got closer to the end at each side. A spreadsheet was created by Liz Davey with input from the Garden Club members that contained the common and genus names of the plants and flowers, the height and maturity, color, seasonality, and its drought tolerance. Leslie and I then got to work creating a layout using the plants and flowers on a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet consisted of 30 native varieties that we could choose from. We separately envisioned how we thought the placement of the plants and flowers should appear in the garden based on that height, color, and season to provide the best possible coverage for the Plaza garden. We met on 2 occasions at the gazebo at Town Hill and reviewed our plans. After some minor changes, we then invited Liz Davey to review our plan and make any necessary changes. The plan was submitted to the Veterans Garden Committee for final approval. Before the final approval, the decision was made to reduce the varieties in favor of larger clusters to create a bolder display. From the original varieties of 30 native plants, the approval was reduced to 14. The plan was then redrafted with a maximum of 14 plants and flowers. The grant was written to include the plan and updated drawing, and then submitted to the Federation for grant approval and funding. During this time, the Garden Club received donations to be used to supplement the total cost of both sides of the Plaza garden, as well as a plan for the continuation of the maintenance program that would be needed over the coming years. In early October, Michelle Noonan and I met with members of the Norfolk Department of Public Works, who led us out back to their pile of boulders and stones. Michelle and I thought that different types of boulders would provide the texture and accent for the garden. Michelle, climbing over the boulder pile, measured and tagged them as I created the list. We decided to use 20 boulders for each side. The largest boulder measured almost 3 feet in diameter, gradually reducing in size at the end to about 16 inches. In late November, the DPW moved the boulders from their back lot and placed them on the lawn in front of the garden, right where you're sitting. In the meantime, with the help of Emily and Bob Nicodemus, we dug the trenches needed to set the boulders when placed in their proper place. In mid-March, the DPW, using a tractor with a claw-like device, picked up the boulders and placed them in their locations as directed by Leslie Lincoln and me. In the same time frame, Garden Club committee members were able to obtain the plants and flowers from several different nurseries, and on May 8th, the Garden Club, with the help of students from King Philip and Mansfield High Schools, installed the plants and flowers that were purchased from those nurseries. Excuse me. The Garden Club members and the student volunteers brought the plants to their designated spots. When all the plants and flowers were in place, they were planted above and below the boulders, using a technique of planting on a slope as suggested by Betty Sanders. Our goal was to get both sides of the garden as close as possible to a mirror image of one another. Several of our chosen plants were unavailable, so those were purchased and planted later. After all the plantings were done, a deer deterrent was sprayed at the base of the plants to discourage the deer. We then gave the plants and flowers a good watering to get them established, and mulch was placed around the plantings to cut down the weed growth and retain the water as much as possible. Several of the garden club members then took on the responsibility of watering the plants throughout the summer, especially during the hot weather, to make sure the plants would survive the heat. Most of the plants and flowers have established themselves, and with added water of the tropical storms the past 2 months, there has been little need to water, especially as we approach the fall season. The Garden Club also purchased signs for each side that provide the common and genus name of each plant or flower. Going forward, the Garden Club will monitor the plants and flowers as spring approaches to replace any that did not survive, adjust as necessary the plants and flowers that are overcrowded, and spread them out accordingly to keep the garden flourishing. Lastly, before you leave, we hope that you will look at the garden and view it from up close, being mindful of the grave markers at the base of the garden, to see these native plants and flowers in this sacred space. We are hopeful that our dedication to this garden brings a colorful display every year as the garden continues to grow. Though I have mentioned a few of the members of the Garden Club, the effort to get this garden completed really required the entire Garden Club, as they all played a role. Special thank yous go out to the students who volunteered to assist with the plantings, and finally to the Norfolk DPW, Barry, Justin, Steve, and Dave, for the work they did in getting the boulders to his garden. Thank you, and let me introduce Betsy Pine, the president of the Norfolk Historical Commission. Betsy.
Good afternoon, everybody. First off, I want to, on behalf of the whole community, thank the Garden Club for this wonderful accomplishment that we can all be proud of for many, many years. And I was just thinking, I'm not a master gardener, but the 3 challenges that they took on, the slope, making the garden deer-proof or animal-proof, and also a 4-season garden, that's a huge, huge accomplishment. So we'll all be very interested to see how it survives the 4 seasons. Secondly, I'd like to thank and recognize all the veterans that are here today, because after all, this is a veterans garden. So thank you for your service. And now some facts about Lowell Robinson. Lowell was Norfolk's landscape architect and the designer of this memorial. He designed it in 1995 to honor our veterans. The garden was not part of the original design, I guess, or it was, but it never looked as beautiful as it looks today. Lowell and Marion lived on Seekonk Street for 50 years or more and raised 3 children who you've already been told about today, Elaine, Craig, and Janice, and they're here today. Lowell designed landscapes in at least 6 locations around town. And as you drive around, as I do, I've always noticed them and I remember Lowell. The Pondville Cemetery was under a restoration and he helped design what we did there. The Norfolk Cemetery on the corner had to be redesigned with the wall and the plantings. He did that. Parts of Town Hill, and his name is on one of the recognition plaques, and the entrances to the Federated Church. But this memorial that you see here is his most complete work. I think we should all be very proud of it. The Norfolk Historical Commission chose to buy and engrave the bench for Lowell to be a part of this project. I'd like to thank the contributors to the Bench Fund: Elaine Grant, Craig and Janice Robinson, the Mass Cultural Council and the Norfolk Cultural Council, the Norfolk Historical Commission, and the Garden Club. They all made contributions to pay for the bench. We wanted everyone to know and to remember Lowell and the work he did for Norfolk. People like Lowell are creative leaders and givers to the town they live in. Lowell worked on many, many different committees, and my friend Thelma gave me a list. I'll just mention a few of them. The Cemetery Committee, the Conservation Commission, he was an associate member, the Design Review Board, the Grange Study Committee, the Town Hill Committee, the entrance to the Lind Conservation property, the Kids Place, and the entrance to the Senior Center. As I said, Lowell was a creative and giving person. We could all learn from his example. Thank you, Lowell, and thank you to the Robinson family.
We've spoken a lot today about the people who helped turn an idea into a beautiful and inspiring garden of native plants. But this isn't a garden that's about the plants. It's a place to honor those in Norfolk who served their country and in some cases made the ultimate sacrifice. It is to these individuals that we dedicate the Veterans Memorial Plaza Lower Gardens. So thank you for attending today's dedication. Please join us for refreshments and enjoy the opportunity for a closer look at the gardens here. And if you enjoy any aspect of gardening, please consider becoming a member of the Garden Club of Norfolk. So thank you for joining us today.